Hello, you are so welcome along to this episode of the Live Well podcast with me, Hilary Rose. In this episode, I talk to actress and Hollywood royalty Kate O'Toole. Kate is the daughter of Hollywood acting legends Peter O'Toole and Cheyenne Phillips. She is an amazing actress in her own right, and she's the chairwoman of the Galway Film Fleadh. She discusses her love of Connemara, feeling supported by the land where she grew up, and her belief in the power of nature.
It was an epiphany. It really was. I think it's the only epiphany I have ever had in my life, where my life just completely changed on a dime.
Wow.
I just felt so at home on the stage. I just felt so at home. I took to it like a duck to water. And I stopped doing dramaturgy and I switched. I just became an actress.
Wow, just like that.
And that director also directed one of the Young Offenders series. His name was Tim Whitby.
Yeah!
Yes. He is to blame for my becoming an actress.
Kate tells me about her really unusual childhood, and she also brings up an incident when she was a baby, which is honestly very upsetting, and I wish I had said something better than I did on the podcast. But afterwards, Kate and I discuss it all, and she was happy to leave it in, and more importantly, she was happy to talk about it in her own words. Kate is a one-of-a-kind and a remarkable human being. I really enjoyed chatting to her, and I really enjoy her company. I hope you enjoy the chat. Kate O'Toole, thank you so much. I'm so honoured to have you on the Live Well podcast this morning. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm slightly nervous because I have listened to a few of your previous interviews and they're absolutely brilliant. You ask amazingly good questions. So I'm terrified.
Oh, there is no need to be terrified, and you know that. But it's funny, and thank you for saying that. I always ask the people that I'm chatting to, what their origin story is, how did they get started in their career path? Where did it all start for them? What was the catalyst for them? And it's so interesting when I go to ask you that question, because literally you're born into it.
Yeah.
You are the daughter of very famous actor Peter O'Toole and very famous actress Cheyenne Phillips. And so it's like you almost didn't have a choice, I mean, and I want to add as well, and I may have this wrong, all right, I don't know, but it's are you named after Katharine Hepburn?
I'm actually slightly. I'm named after two Kates. One of them is Kate Hepburn, yes, who I knew quite well. As well as you can know when you're young. But mostly I'm named after Kate in The Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, wow.
Because my father was on stage at the Royal Shakespeare Company when I was born. And they did the whole production, which, as you know, has a preface before the play itself begins. And the prologue is a vagabond troupe of raggedy ass strolling players looking for a place to set up their tent and perform The Taming of the Shrew. So all the people who are in The Taming of the Shrew are in disguise as beggars and vagabonds and, roving players. And Dame Peggy Ashcroft was playing Kate. And she held me when I was about 3 weeks old as a babe in arms in the show, because they figured, yes, people probably had babies when they were on the road. So why not stick a baby in there? And apparently I sort of woke up and peered out at the audience with interest and was quite happy with what I saw. So I can, with all honesty, say that was the first and last time I ever was on stage due to parental influence. Nepotism was totally responsible for my 3-week-old debut.
Wow, what a debut into the world. And your unofficial godmother being Audrey Hepburn, that's really, you don't get much more of a Hollywood royalty lineage right there. Did you feel like you had a choice in your own career path in that sense? Or was it something that...
Oh, no, I totally had a choice because it wasn't on my radar at all to be a performer. No. And also, I think it has a lot to do with where you go to school and who your peers are and things like that. So I went to a very academic girls' school in North London, which was very, very Jewish, partly because of the demographic, but partly because the only way you could get in was with an entrance exam. And all the bright girls in the area were the Jewish girls, and they all went on to become barristers and captains of industry and things like that. So it was a very, very academic school. And in those days, there was no drama. You didn't do that. So I'd never acted in my life at all in anything. No, nothing. Except at kindergarten, around about this time of the year, having had no religious upbringing whatsoever, apart from Judaism at school, I came home from kindergarten and announced very proudly that I was going to be in an activity play.
Oh, beautiful.
And my Welsh grandmother, my mother's mother, lived with us and kind of ran the house because my parents were away working all the time, really. So she ran the house and she said, "Oh, and what is the activity play about?" And I said, "It's about Jesus' kite at the crossings."
So gorgeous.
So that was my other performance, and then I didn't perform at all. No, I wanted to be a writer, so I wanted to leave school. I hated school. It was a lovely school, but I just was no good at being at school. I didn't understand why I was there. I didn't get the point of it at all. The only subjects I was good at were no good in the real world. Like I have an A level in art. Like, fuck use is that to anybody? You know, hopeless, really. Latin, I got very good grades in Latin. Again. Wow. What am I going to do with that? Nothing.
You might have a conversation with the Queen. You never know.
I did actually once have a conversation with the Queen. Well, it wasn't really a conversation. I went to the Irish state dinner that Michael D. Higgins had in 2014, and I got an invite. And so, yes, I think it's the only time in my life I've been completely starstruck. I mean, yeah, you have to, you mill around in this huge hall full of Irish antiquities, all the lovely stuff they have, and they're showing and they're telling and all that. And then before you go in to sit down at this table that seats 150 people, you are introduced to the lineup of your hosts. And so that is Sabina and Michael first, and then the Queen and Prince Philip, who I've always called Zorba, last. And I thought my head was going to fall off because, I mean, I've met millions of famous people. You know what it's like when you're in the business. You meet people, you work with people. You don't get starstruck. You take people as you find them, especially if you're working with them. You have to. But the Queen was completely on another level. And the amazing thing about it is, you know, that Michael D is not tall in stature. Right? He's known for being a little diminutive. Okay, so it's like all those things when you meet famous people who you've only seen on screen. When you meet them in real life, they're so much smaller. So the Queen was standing next to Michael D and she came up to his shoulder.
No.
And she was wearing a crown and heels, darling.
Oh, my goodness.
Crown, high crown, not high heels, not stilettos, but still heels. She's shorter than him.
Wow. She's had this big energy. So I actually said that to somebody recently. Sometimes you can never tell. Like I'm tall. We've met. You're tall. I'm tall. But I never notice people's height. I think it's more about how they present themselves and their energy.
And you can't tell on screen anyway. And in fact, the smaller you are, the better it is for the small screen anyway.
For the frame, definitely. Once you're trying to
I mean, a lot of people, they're tiny, like Madonna, Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman. They're all very, very small.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, the Queen, I just gurgled. I was absolutely strangulated. Not only that, but Zorba was twinkling at me. I got the full twinkle. I was like, Jesus, crack. It was our out-of-body experience. It was wonderful. Insane.
We had the opportunity to meet Charles and Camilla when they came to Cork that time, and it was lovely. And we were brought into the city hall and we were introduced and and talking about a twinkling. So I was there with my husband, Peter, and, it was like, Camilla came over and it was like, oh, I can't remember what the introduction was. Anyway, she may as well have put her hand in my face and just went, oh yes, and who are you, to Peter? And talk about a twinkling. I was like, oh, okay. All right, that's fine then. Okay, I thought you were meeting me, but that's fine.
Yes. I've heard she's quite gamey, Camilla.
Oh, a bit of fun, I'd say. Definitely a bit of fun. So just going back to your, growing up with famous parents, I always wonder how a child feels growing up with famous parents. I mean, now you're an adult. Were you aware of it at the time? Was it completely normal to you?
Yes.
Because
you can't tell when you're young. You can't tell. You really can't. So everything around you is your normality. It is. Mm-hmm. You don't know any different, really. I used to go to, school friends' houses for tea after school sometimes and watch TV and things. And I grew up in this very huge Georgian house in Hampstead, which had 5 floors and a nursery on top, which was completely self-contained. So me and my sister, we had a nanny. We had our own bedrooms, bathroom, kitchen, everything up on the nursery. And the rest of the house was kind of out of bounds. Except for the basement where my grandmother ruled the roost.
Wow.
The housekeeper, Desk Sergeant Phillips, people used to call her.
As all grandmothers are.
Yes. So lots of nannies and me granny. But it did mean that we got to spend a lot of time, private time, on our own, without being supervised by people. And so I go around to my friends' houses after school and sit down, have tea, and the parents would be in the room, and I'd be thinking, when are they going to leave? When are they going to get out of here so we can just, get on with our lives without them? It's no, this is the sitting room. Everybody's in the same sitting room. I don't know if I like that. So whatever you're exposed to as a child is your normality. I mean, that's why, it's very difficult for children who've been abused, for example, to come forward and talk about it because it's so normal to them. They don't know it's wrong. So fame is similar. You don't know what fame is. You don't know. No.
And in one article that I read, I've been reading about you, Kate. I did my homework.
Sure you have. Like a good interviewer should do. Yeah.
In one interview, you talked about having, almost an army of staff around, and that there was at one point a threat of you guys being kidnapped, I think. Is that right? I mean, you probably weren't even aware of that as a child.
I was aware of some stuff when I got a bit older, when I was sort of 14, I remember. My mother was on TV a lot at the time, and she got a lot of very weird phone calls. And yes, there was a security issue for a while, which is why I loved getting out of London and going to Connemara, because complete freedom.
Beautiful.
Again, though, it's sort of the reverse of other people's experience, because everybody I know who grows up in a small town wants to get out of it. Of course they do. They want to get out. They want to see the bright lights. They want to go, and be free from the constraints of the small town. I had a completely reverse experience. I was free from the constraints of chauffeurs, nannies,
spotlight in a sense,
all that kind of stuff. It would just be me, my granny, my sister, and she would be like a typical mother. She'd open the door and she'd say, I don't want to see you until it gets dark, and leave us on the beach. And for me, it's always been complete freedom. And there's something about the landscape as well that is I find more freeing than being in a city somehow.
It's like that kind of freedom. Children don't have that anymore. It's completely gone. I had a lot of freedom as a kid as well, but my kids don't have that freedom. There's social media, there's all that kind of stuff as well, where they have information at their fingertips. I mean, obviously mine are so young, I keep them all away from it. But
how old are yours?
Mine are 5, just turned 5 and 8. So they're still very small. So, I mean, they're in that kind of protective cocoon, but, as much as possible, I try to get them out into nature. And you talk about the landscape, and particularly in Connemara, there's such healing in nature and in those landscapes. And you still visit there quite a lot. How does it affect you now as opposed to then? Is it the same thing? Is it the same sense of serenity out there for you?
Yes, I feel very supported by the landscape in a
Mm,
way that I like my own company. You know, I don't have children, I'm not married, and that's by choice.
mm,
And I always feel in great company in nature. I really, I
mm.
feel so supported by it. And I feel it's company. I really do.
Yeah.
You know, the landscape has a personality and it changes. It has moods. It's everything. I find it very nourishing.
Absolutely. How important was it for your father? Because your father was Irish, but born in England. I'm correct, aren't I? Born
Yes,
in England.
yes. He was born in
Your
Leeds.
your mother's Welsh. Were you born in the UK or born in Ireland?
I was born in Stratford-on-Avon during
Mm,
the Taming of the Shrew.
of course. Sorry. Yeah. Of course. You said.
But I have an Irish birth cert. I'm an Irish citizen. I have an
Mm,
Irish birth cert. I have an Irish passport. I pay taxes here. I live here. And I have the most extraordinary birth cert. I showed it to an archivist who does a lot of genealogy. And she said, Jesus, I've never seen anything like that. It's the long form birth cert, looks
mm.
exactly like the Irish birth cert, and it's as Gaeilge, so it's everything. But it's issued by the Department of Foreign Births, which is something that does not exist anymore.
Yeah. I was going to say. Yeah.
And the genealogist had never heard of it in her life. But I have the document. It's real.
I love it.
No, I'm the only one. I have a sister and a half brother who were both born in Dublin. I'm the only one who wasn't. I was
How
busy.
how important when you talk about the landscape and Ireland and the land itself, like how important was it for your dad, for you guys to have that connection to Ireland? Did he?
For me, it was enormously important. I understood his connection.
Mm,
I spent the first 2 years of my life in Wales with my grandmother because she was still working and before she became a widow and couldn't work anymore. So I spent the first 2 years of my life in Wales, but I don't have and many subsequent holidays down there. My relatives there had a dairy farm, and I've actually still got the milking stool that I used.
oh, beautiful.
Yeah, but you'd have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the fucking dark to go and milk these cows. And I don't know. I never got any bounce from Wales. I can't describe it. I just don't know. I feel no connection to it at all. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Not the scenery, the people, the culture, nothing. But from a very, very, very young age, from I think as young as I can remember, from the age of about 6, I felt at home in Ireland, and I can't explain to you why, but I definitely did, to such an extent that it was very difficult to get me back on the plane at Shannon to go back to London and then back to school. I would have, an absolute shit fit at the thought of it. I mean, I hated being dragged back. And then as soon as I was old enough to leave home and fuck off and do what I wanted to do, I did. And I went straight back to Dublin and Connemara.
Wow.
Yeah. But I've lived in lots of other places as well. But I think Connemara has been the only thing in my life that has been the constant backdrop that has never changed, ever.
Beautiful.
So in a way, I take it for granted as well, I'm not one of these people who think, oh, I must go down to the West for the weekend. I'm like, no, the West is there,
But isn't it beautiful that it is and that it supported you the whole time?
I'm so lucky, yes.
So obviously, like having read so much about you and having spoken to you in person, there's a lot of stories about your family and your family history. And some of them sound complicated and some of them sound really out there. And how do you deal with stories or documentaries or information like that? Do you tune into it? Do you tune out? Are you involved with documentaries about your family? How do you feel about it when you see stuff and read stuff, having lived through a lot of it?
Yeah. I remember the first time that it really affected me. I was about 10, and I was in Connemara and just with my grandmother, and my parents were very rarely there when I was there. They were always away working. I don't know where they were. They weren't there anyway. And I read in the Daily Mirror, which used to be a good broadsheet newspaper. That's how old I am. I read that my father had cancer.
Oh, God.
And I was very upset. And it just
Yeah.
wasn't true at all. So that was my first real understanding of how inaccurate the press can be, how little they should be trusted. And from that day on, I've paid very little attention to anything that the press has to say, good, bad, or indifferent. You know?
And equally, I suppose, about yourself as well. Because when you do projects, you do press, every actor has to do that. And sometimes I don't do it anymore, but I would reread an article and go, that's not what I said.
Oh God, yes. Yes, I have a classic example of this. It's so funny. There's a journalist who I will spare him the embarrassment of mentioning his name, but he did an interview with him. I did an interview with him where I revealed, because I'm not ashamed of it, that I have a mark on my arse. It's like scar tissue in the shape of a shamrock, vaguely, or it was. And the joke at the time of my being born was that I have a little stamp on my right buttock, which means made in Ireland. Okay, so I have had this thing my whole life, and it kind of looked like a shamrock until I hit puberty. And then it kind of blurred everywhere. So I was telling a journalist about this, and it's very obviously a brand it's white scar tissue. And I wanted to get it actually tattooed because it is there. And the tattoo said, no, we can't tattoo scar tissue. It doesn't absorb the ink. So I was just stuck with this misshapen thing. But when it was sort of perfect, it did look like 3 perfectly round burn marks, such as might come from a cigarette. I'm just saying.
Hey, yeah. Is this what you think happened?
Yes, I'm sure of it. Okay. Made in Ireland. Ho, ho, ho. Anyway, I was telling a journalist this story, and it's ended up now as fact that I have a tattoo of a shamrock on my arse. The whole point of the story is that I couldn't get a tattoo of a shamrock on my arse. Yeah. And he to this day, he says, but I have a tape recording of our interview. And I said, but you're not hearing my words. Like, you don't have a tape recording. And there's no way I would have described it as a tattoo, because it isn't. It's a brand, which is a different thing.
How did that come about?
Who knows? I mean, I was probably just born. I would imagine drunken visitations from cast members from the Royal Shakespeare Company. That would be my guess.
That's upsetting to think of. It really is.
Well, nowadays, of course, everybody would be in prison, but in those days, it wasn't such a bad thing. And I have no memory of it.
Well, and at least you have, you're chipper about it. We'll say that.
Well, I have no memory of it.
Yeah. Wow. You once told me as well about your father's estate. I think this is really interesting. I don't want to talk too much about your dad because, you're an absolute...
No, you're right. No, you're right to bring it up because honestly, it's driving me crazy even right now. I've got insane stuff to deal with to do with his estate. Like, oh God. And it's so random, it could be anything. Mostly it's very boring taxes and just legal stuff, but at the moment, a script has arrived, which I've read, and it's based on my father's infamous production of the Scottish play. We're allowed to call it Macbeth because we're not in the theatre.
I agree. Let's just call it that.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So I don't know if you know, but he had this mad production in the early 1980s, which was critically panned. I mean, it was just a riot. It was a shit show. It was chaos.
Yes.
But it sold out. I mean, it did the best box office they've ever done at the Old Vic. It broke all box office records. And so from that point of view, from the audience point of view, it was a big success, but not from anybody else's. And anyway, somebody's written a script about it and they want me either to be involved in some form of executive production, like I suppose trying to steer it away from the wrong direction, but I've also been put a part in it. And it's a tricky one because I haven't even told the writer this yet because I just don't know what to say. This is when an agent comes in handy to act as a buffer between you and people who you're not really quite sure how to approach. But the whole premise of the film is that my father was drinking the whole time, and he wasn't. He wasn't. That's not what it was. He was doing other things, a lot of other things, but it wasn't alcohol. So there are a lot of alcohol themes in this play, which are just completely wrong. I mean, so, how do I deal with that? The writer is waiting to hear from me.
Well, I suppose, I mean, do you deal with it with honesty and truth and say, look, this isn't what happening. Maybe there was other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's always something, So at the moment, that's hanging over my head because I haven't figured out a way to reply to him yet. Do I even want to consider being in it or what? It's just weird.
Yeah.
It's not.
And there's that and his actual physical estate as well that you had to take care of, which people might think, oh, wonderful, stuff was left to you, whatever. But you had to go through. I mean, you told me there was a room full of balls.
Yeah, that's right.
Elected.
No, there wasn't really a lot of stuff left to me. It was just, when somebody dies, you have to follow the instructions in their will. And his instruction was to sell his house and divide the proceeds among various people. But none of those people were with me, helping me. One was in America. There was another one who hadn't spoken to him for a long time. It was all, family mess. The whole thing did land on my shoulders. So I had to empty out this 5-bedroom house. And if it had been Auntie Nellie who died, I would have just hired a skip and dumped everything in it. But I couldn't, because every time I picked up a piece of paper or an article of clothing or a ball covered in autographs from famous sports people who I don't know anything about, I'd think, oh, no, I can't throw this away because this is part of that story. And that probably should go into an archive, really. So I ended up giving myself a crash course in DIY archiving.
Wow.
People would come over now and again to help because there was an awful lot to do. But they were no help because going through old office files and things like that, I can remember every single handwriting of every single secretary, every single nanny. I remember their names. I knew what their handwriting looked like. So people would be picking up a photograph with stuff written on the back of it, and I'd be trying to date it and place it in the right category. And they'd be standing there going, oh, look at that great photo. I'd be like, where does it belong?
Yes. So much. Yeah, you'd so much to get through. Yeah.
And nobody else could help me, really. Nobody could.
Wow.
Except eventually a proper archivist did come and help me. Once I had everything boxed up. It was 75 boxes, not including clothes and costumes and props and things like that.
And they all went, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I found a good home for everything in a place called the Harry Ransom Center in Texas. And the problem I had with managing his stuff was a lot of the theatrical museums in England were very interested in all the theatrical memorabilia, but they weren't remotely interested in anything to do with film. And then there were agents for writers who were interested in his writing, his manuscripts, because he wrote quite a few things, some of which were published, a lot of which weren't, adaptations of plays and things like that. He and Sam Beckett worked together on an adaptation for Waiting for Godot for film.
Wow.
Yeah, so things like that never saw the light of day. Writerish people would be very interested in, but that would be of no interest to film or theatre people either. So the Harry Ransom Center, honestly, is the most amazing place because it's like a one-stop shop. It will cover everything. So, and it's important. It was important to me anyway to keep the collection together. And you don't make a vast amount of money by selling an archive, but to me, the way to make money off all this stuff is to keep it and take it to auction, which there's so much stuff. I could be doing this until I'm 500 years old. I don't want it hanging around my neck. And I didn't want it to go to different obscure places, never to be seen again. I wanted everything to stay together and be available available for proper researchers because it's a part of a university. So everything is available for free to look at. All you have to do is book an appointment and go there, and you can get everything. Everything you want is there. And I do hope that one day it will lead to a proper, good biography being written about him, because there aren't any. They're mostly filmographies. They're just filmographies. You know, they don't really understand him or get in under his skin in any way, or know anything about his writing. Or, you know, there's a lot in the archive. If somebody interested wants to go snooping, they're more than welcome. All the answers are there.
Who would you, if you were to have somebody write his biography now, who would it be?
God, I don't know. I really don't know. It would have to be somebody who, I think the best biographers really understand their subjects.
As a human, not just as an icon in that
exactly.
way.
Yes. Yeah. So it would have to be somebody who shared a lot of his characteristics, I suppose, or who would understand what a childhood in wartime was like. You know, all kinds of things that shaped him. Would have to be somebody, and somebody who isn't exactly, you know, blown away by all the, I mean, it's so boring, these catalogues of films and plays. This was done in that year and that, you know, who cares?
That's what I love about you, Kate. At the end of the day, you've just got this, attitude. I love it.
Well,
it's like enough is enough, you know?
Oh, exactly. Yes, quite.
Aside from the acting and dramatic lineage that you come from, you wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
And what made you take the step from writing into acting?
Oh, it was a complete accident. It was a real accident. I ran away from a bad love affair in London. I was waitressing at a jazz club in London, Ronnie Scott's. Fabulous. Best place to waitress, because you can listen to the music and just forget about being a waitress and get transported by the jazz. It was lovely. So I had a lot of New York phone numbers in my book from musicians and people saying, you've got to come to New York. So I had a very unhappy breakup, and I thought, I've just got to get out of England. And I thought, fuck it, I'll go to New York. Went to New York. Didn't come back for 5 years. So I was quite happy over there, worked as a waitress in Irish bars. And I thought, oh God, I'm illegal. You know, the only way I can stay is to become a student. I've got to go to college. So I'd heard about the Yale Drama School, which was kind of just up the road in Connecticut, not too far from Manhattan, which was important because really I just wanted to be in Manhattan. So I applied to go, and I got into Yale School of Drama, which is a wonderful school because it has many, many, many different factions. There is a whole section just for acting, a whole section for stage management. There's a whole section for costume. There's directing. There's everything, including dramaturgy, which is what I went to do. And dramaturgy can involve writing. It's an interesting field because it's not just one thing. It's many, many different things. So I was halfway through. Oh, yeah, this is funny. I was halfway through the first term, and one of the directors in the directing program came up to me and said he wanted me to be in his play, because we all had to work on live productions all the time. So I said, no. I said, I've never done any acting in my life. You know, why do you want me? And he was doing a play it was called Christie in Love by Howard Brenton. And it was about the murders at 10 Rillington Place by the serial killer, John Reginald Halliday Christie.
My goodness.
And he wanted me to play Christie. And I was like, I don't understand. Why? Why? And I've never acted in my life. I said, well, if you can kind of walk me through everything, if you can teach me how to do it, I will do it. And he did explain to me the reason for wanting to cast a woman was that really the villains of the piece were the press, the salacious press.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was more brain damaged by mustard gas in the war. He wasn't right in the head. And he was quite a timid little thing with glasses. You know, you'd never think he'd be up for strangling hooers and burying them under his floorboards, which is what.
Goodness.
The play focuses on how much pleasure the British press get from vilifying somebody like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. So there were two scary cops and then this very timid little man, me. And I have to say, it was an epiphany. It really was. I think it's the only epiphany I have ever had in my life, where my life just completely changed on a dime.
Wow.
I just felt so at home on the stage. I just felt so at home. I took to it like a duck to water. And I stopped doing dramaturgy and I switched. I just became an actress.
Wow, just like that.
And that director also directed one of the Young Offenders series. His name was Tim Whitby.
Yes. Yeah, Tim was creative director that came on for season 2 and 3, I think. Tim was awesome. Okay. Awesome man. Yeah.
Well, he is to blame for my becoming an actress.
Oh, and that comes full loop then, because it's a bit of a spoiler alert. But can we say it? Oh, Kate's well whispered. Kate's in the Young Offenders. Wow, so it changed like that. And actually, a role like that is very ahead of its time. You know, like gender switching is done now quite frequently, you know, when you take a male role and it's played by a female. But at the time, that wasn't done that much. So that's quite ahead of its time as well.
Yeah.
I love when you say you had an epiphany.
Yeah.
Wow. What did it feel like in that moment, in your bones? What was it just like?
Hey, if you're enjoying this episode and you'd like to show your support, if you like, you can buy us a coffee using the Buy Me a Coffee app or online at buymeacoffee.com/livewildpodcast, or just click the link in our show notes, it will take you there. Alternatively, you can also donate crypto to the show using the BitDonate app or at bitdonate.com and search for Live Wild, or just follow the link in the show notes. Either or both those donations really help us make the best show possible. And as always, you can like, subscribe, and share the show with your mates or on social media. Thank you so much for your help.
Well, it just took over my life completely, both when I was awake and when I was asleep. So Christie strangled prostitutes. And I think he gassed some of them as well, because all the houses then had gas poison. And I don't know how he managed to do that, but he'd been gassed in the war, and obviously had a lot of damage from those experiences that turned him into a monster. And I remember in rehearsals for the play, waking up at night, really smelling gas in the apartment. Like so strongly that I had to ring up the superintendent and say, I really think there's a gas leak. There was no gas leak. It was all in my head. Wow. I also had nightmares where I was strangling myself. So I had nonstop total immersion about gas and strangling and prostitutes and policemen and the accent and the place, the geography, just everything. It just seeped into every cell of my being.
Wow.
Just
how do you separate yourself out from that? Because I think if that's your first project, that's very hard to understand the emotion of it and why it's all happening. But now as an experienced actor, and I will say a very fine actor in their own right, which you are, how do you separate yourself out from that?
Well, that's what you learn at drama school. And I think that's what's good about theatre is at drama school, you learn technique, which is the ability to create a genuine emotion, an honest emotion, but then not bring it home with you, to be able to turn it off. Judi Dench has the nickname Judi Drench because she can make herself weep at the drop of a hat. And then 2 seconds later, it's like, how many sugars do you want in your tea, love? On, off, on, off. And it doesn't make it unreal.
Yes.
But that's technique. And I do hear hilarious stories about actors who've only ever done film who get completely swamped by the emotions. They don't know how to turn them off and they think it's all real. I've just read a wonderful memoir called Chasing the Panther by a friend who's in her 80s now and was a producer and a script assistant and all kinds of things. in Italian cinema when Fellini and Visconti were at their, she was working for them all. And, she's got amazing stories, one of which is a film with Claudia Cardinale, who she was a PA to, has a breakup in this film scene, and the jilted lover starts hurling abuse at her. And then while the cameras were rolling, starts picking up stones and throwing them at her head. And rocks, and was completely being very aggressive and in a way that was dangerous. And of course, the Italians, being the Italians, no, keep rolling. It's a real drama, real. We want a real. And then my friend Carolyn had to stop it and say, but you don't want real blood coming out of her head. This is ridiculous. So, I think film actors have a harder time of being able to turn it off.
It's interesting. I think when you look at the body and emotions in the body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. It's like being in fight or flight. It's like having that tiger chasing you, even if the tiger's not chasing you anymore, but your nervous system is in a state of fight or flight. Your body feels it and believes it. And I think it's the same for acting. I think actors a lot of them, like you say, when they're feeling these real emotions, put themselves through an awful lot of stress and emotion. And it took me a while to actually learn that. And I've played opposite you, and I learned so much from you. It was a really beautiful experience. It was really wonderful. It was wonderful to just witness you. And again, with the tears, I saw it. It was on and off, and as it should be, and not to have it affect you or take it home, apart from the excruciating heat.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's very, very, very sweet of you to compliment me like that, but I will never forget that day of the heat, because I really think that my brain was being gently simmered. And you'd been brilliant, because you'd managed to get some isotonic drinks in, not just energy drinks, but proper drinks with electrolytes that we needed, because it was 110 degrees. I remember the chocolate on the digestive biscuits just sliding off the biscuits. And I drank so much liquid because I knew it was hot and I had to, and I couldn't pee. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I thought, my kidneys aren't working, because I have drunk a gallon now of electrolytes and I can't pee. And the same thing happened to my brain. And I remember doing a scene, a two-hander, and looking at the other actor's face, and I could see the mouth moving. I knew the lines because I'd read the script, but I couldn't hear. Couldn't hear anything.
I don't think we fully realized how hot it was or the effect it was having until you reach a breaking point in that kind of heat. And
I think the nurse was getting close to shutting it down that particular day.
That particular day. I think it was one day where it just got excruciatingly hot, and all the fans had to be turned off for sound reasons. And
noise, and they weren't working properly anyway. It was very difficult. And also there was no plan B. I mean, people don't realize how difficult, not difficult, but how people think actors' lives are just glamorous and limousines and red carpets, and they just don't.
Aren't they? Kate, aren't they not?
What the craziness you put up with, the physical discomfort, all kinds of stuff. That day was absolutely mad. So it's very nice of you to say nice things about me, but honestly, my brain had left the building that day. I don't know what I was doing. I couldn't hear. I could barely see. It was awful. Awful.
Well, with that, I would say welcome to the young offenders, because that's it. That stuff happens a lot.
Well, I had so much fun. I don't know if I told you this at the time, but honestly, different roles do affect you differently. And going back to how difficult some can be, there are some that really do affect you, no matter how hard you try to turn the tap off. Like I did a play about musicians in Auschwitz once, and that was just horrific, because you just couldn't let it go. You just couldn't. I found that one very difficult. So I do like doing comedy very much, and I think, like Edmund Kean, the great Shakespearean tragedian, said, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And I always think that funny comedians are actually, in my book, the best actors, because it is more difficult, actually.
Mm.
And I just enjoy it more than anything else. And I had a wonderful experience. You know how it is in your career. You can't plan anything.
Yeah.
You really can't. I don't think you can anyway.
Mm.
I once had a wonderful job in a BBC sitcom in the mid-90s, which sadly we did a whole season, but it didn't get picked up. And it was written by comedy gold. I mean, John Antrobus. I mean, people who'd written Steptoe and Son and had worked with Hancock's Half Hour, you know, really, really good. So they'd been given a whole season. And it was right at the time when comedy was turning into anarchy. It was the time of punk. And it was the time of Alexei Sayle. And, you know, it was the new comedy. Every 10 years, there's the new comedy.
Yeah.
So at the time, this was a period piece. It was set in the war, and it was kind of Dad's Army-ish, which I think could have been very successful. But no, because it wasn't fashionable, so it got cancelled. And I was heartbroken because, honestly, that was the most fun job I've ever had in my entire life. It was done in the studio. So we had just a week of rehearsing, and then you'd have a performance day. You'd have a matinee and an evening to a studio audience.
Oh, fun.
Yes. And they would pick the best bits of both and mix them together. Even with a real live audience, the laugh track still sounds fake. I don't know why that is, but it was a real audience. To me, that was the perfect marriage of not filming, which takes forever, just TV, quicker. The joy of an audience, the theatrical feedback of having an audience, which honestly, I don't even know how you manage it a lot of the time without an audience, because, when you're doing comedy, it's so useful to have that gauge, you know?
Yeah.
And that was my favorite job ever. And when interviewers always ask me, what was your favorite thing? I always say that one. But my favorite one since then is Young Offenders.
Oh,
definitely. Just because people are so nice and the scripts are so good and they're like mini films, and just everybody, you're all just so good at what you do, and you've had so much experience with each other. It's just a joy to be dropped into something like that. You know, you're just surrounded by pros at the top of their game. I felt very privileged to be among you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's like I really enjoyed coming back for season 4, actually, because of the shorthand we have with each other. You're stepping back into these really comfortable characters that you know so well. Yes, the environment changes and the scripts are new and, you know, there's all that. But I think the relationship, the bonds that we all have is probably quite apparent, and it's quite shorthand, sometimes a bit short with each other as well.
Yeah. No, I could tell you all had telepathy. It was amazing to see it. And that's just a gorgeous thing. And it's very rare. It doesn't happen that often. You know, it's a lovely thing when it does happen.
Well, I'm glad you're on the list, or that Young Offenders is on the list of one of your favorite projects.
For sure.
Yeah, you're right. That style of sitcom back then, I mean, it kind of came back in the 90s in America. Like Friends, I think, was in front of a studio audience.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with that idea, really.
It's brilliant.
Did you ever think of doing one, like a Young Offenders one, with a studio audience? I mean, you're limited to the studio, and I know what you make are little films.
Yeah.
Little films. But I wonder.
Yeah, because every episode in The Young Offenders is like a film. It's treated almost like a film. It's standalone, but yet it fits into the overarching story. Yeah. I think it would be wonderful. I mean, obviously Mrs. Brown's Boys was done that way. I wondered, you change the shape of something too much? Or I would love to do a show like that. I think it would be great fun. It would, maybe not The Young Offenders, maybe it would be something else. But it would be really interesting to do.
Yeah, audience is just, for comedy, is just, whoever came up with that idea should get a Nobel Prize.
It's interesting. I always find, like, for comedy, if I'm trying to hit a beat, the only thing that I go by is what I find funny myself.
Yeah.
And I've had to develop it that way, because otherwise, what one person finds funny, another person won't find funny, and what that person finds, so you end up being kind of drawn to a lot of different places going and not knowing what's funny in the end. So I kind of had to have my own internal compass of what's funny. Well, I find it funny, I'll do that. You know, if the director says do it that way, fine, no problem. But
yeah, I think that's where you really miss. I do anyway, having an audience, because it's so wonderful to be able to, you can gauge it that way. You know, you can totally gauge whether the audience likes that character or what aspects of the character they find funny. Or, you could also, if they're laughing at things you don't want them to laugh at, you can make that stop as well.
Yeah, interesting.
It's kind of great.
Yeah, that is. It's like even your hand movements. It's almost like a puppetry, when you're using, a live audience. Would you go back to writing at any point where you started?
Oh God! Well, I do the odd time, but I don't have. I did have a column in the Irish Times for a while.
Oh.
In a style section, they had me, not style to do with makeup and hair. No, it was style to do with gardening, architecture.
Oh, nice.
The environment, stuff in the environment, aesthetics, I suppose. Definitely not makeup and hair, because I couldn't write about that to save my life. But they wanted my voice, and the column, they encouraged me to rant against things that were displeasing me in the environment, like wooden plates instead of china plates.
What's displeasing about wooden plates? Come on, Kate.
Everything flies off. They're disgusting. I mean, you can't eat off a wooden plate like a trencher man in the 16th century. No, we've evolved.
Do you know what I will tell you about wooden plates and wooden chopping boards? They have natural antibacterial microbes in them from the wood.
Oh, I'm sure they're better than plastic. For sure. Yeah. I wouldn't want. I use chopping boards, but I don't eat off them. I draw the line. I'm sorry. Stuff like that. What else did I go on about? I went on about dogs being barred from pubs. I was very cross about that because I have a dog. Mm-hmm. And I like to bring him everywhere. And he likes a good pub as much as anybody else. He's staring now. He knows I'm talking about him. What else did I write about? Oh, those annoying the bumps for blind people at the traffic crossings.
Oh,
so I wrote about that. I was like, okay, blind people, if there's one thing they can do very well, it's hear. They know when the traffic is moving and when it isn't. Whereas poor old person on a wheelchair is getting car sickness being driven over these bumps all the time.
I didn't think about that, actually.
Yeah, things like that. I write about stuff like that. I've never written any fiction. I did write 3 plays when I was... No, they all got dumped because it wasn't on the school curriculum. So I sort of went off that. But dialogue... I guess if I was going to write anything, I don't have a fictitious idea in my head. I really don't. I have lots of great friends who are novelists. People have actually given up acting because their writing has taken over. And it's an interesting thing, actually. Actors and writers, they are different animals from the same part of the forest. That's the most beautiful way of putting it. And I agree 100%. Yeah. And you get that with other things too, like music. People who are really very good at music also have a thing about numbers and math. Those two go together. And so acting and writing definitely go together. And it is partly, I think, to do with being an observer, observing things and then channeling them back out. And it is through words if you're an actor. And so you read a lot of scripts. So you do develop a skill, a muscle for knowing the difference between a good script and a shit script. And that helps your writing too,
I agree. You can see a good script within the first three pages. First page, you can see it. Yeah. Interesting. So you're also on the board of directors for the Galway Film Fleadh.
Yes.
My goodness. You are a busy lady. That is arguably one of the most funnest film festivals in Ireland, I would say. Fastnet is encroaching on its fun territory.
Fastnet is good. Have you been? I love Fastnet. Yes. We have to meet at Fastnet next year. We should
definitely.
Try and do that.
It's so much fun.
Yes.
But and Galway's the same. It's got this vibe of like everyone lumped in together. That's what I love about it. There's no kind of exclusivity about it. And Fastnet's the same. It's just like everyone's on the one street. Right. Everyone's in the pubs around, having the crack.
We don't do red carpets. It's a red carpet free zone. We don't believe in red carpets or VIP access or anything like that.
So that's intentional. That's intentional.
It's intentional, because it's not just about the films that we screen. It's also there's a film fair going on at the same time. Part of the Galway Film Fleadh is the film market. And we get all the same people that are in Cannes that nobody can get to meet. Producers, people who are able to greenlight things, or development money, people who are in the business on the hard sell side, the nuts and bolts of the business, people you cannot get to see at Cannes because you don't have the right level of access, you haven't bought the right ticket or whatever. Everything's very separated, and I don't like that. All those people, they come to Galway every year.
Wow.
They come to Galway every year, and you don't have to, pay a fortune and walk down a red carpet to meet them. I mean, that's the whole point of the festival, is to meet these people. Is the whole point.
And it really stimulates the Irish film industry, and it stimulates young filmmakers coming up. I remember we took the young offenders there, actually. We did. We won. Yeah, sorry. And that we shared it with the date for Mad Mary that year. And I love that.
I didn't know you then. Yes, I didn't know you then at all. I would have handed out those awards because I remember. Yeah. And I do love when that happens, when, I know you're supposed to be neutral and everybody's to be congratulated for winning, but sometimes if it is somebody and it's a film you love and they do win, you just can't contain the joy.
No, it was but like that was such a wonderful, it was such an accessible festival for us. And it was a real stepping stone for us to get where we needed to go after that. So, I can testify that it's really essential to the Irish film industry. And all the wonderful interviews as well that go on. You've interviewed some amazing people along the way.
Yes, during COVID, I ended up doing it because we were, like everybody else, we were locked down. So I did some stuff online, which was quite difficult, actually. Now that you mention it, I do remember having terrible trouble with sound. And of course, everybody I was interviewing was in a hotel. Actors live in hotels when they're working, and hotel Wi-Fi, I don't care how good the hotel is. Yeah. It can be a 10-star hotel, but if there are 400 people using the same Wi-Fi at the same time, it's going to be terrible. So I would be chatting to, I interviewed Gabriel Byrne. He was in a hotel, and every time it came to the punchline, the sound dropped out. Oh, no. And I rang up my boss at the film floor and I said, I don't think it's going to be usable, because it just kept freezing and dropping. And they eventually patched something together. I was too embarrassed to watch. I couldn't watch, but I gather it went okay. But
it was amazing. I watched part of it, so it was amazing. It was really good.
Well, but I understand now how you're kind of, worried about microphones and things like that, because there's nothing worse when the tech goes wrong in the middle of a good story.
Yeah, exactly. And so far so good with us. Our batteries haven't died. There's no.
But I'm not shouting too much because I can't tell.
That was perfect. If you weren't doing what you are doing now, this is a ridiculous question. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? But that's the question I'm asking. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? Is there another career, something that you feel like you'd love to do or go into, or you had aspirations at one point in time?
If I had another life, I would have just left school when I wanted to and got a job with a newspaper as anything, the T-boy, and then work my way up to having a proper career as a writer, and then maybe have ended up in the hallowed halls of, a writer's room for a comedy, that kind of thing. Which, you're never too old to do anything. I don't believe that in ageism at all, but I do think, yes, you are at some point far too old to join a group of writers with extraordinary experience who have done nothing else their entire lives. I would have no business in a room like that. I would just love to be a fly on the wall. And if I had another life, I think that's probably the path I would have ended up on.
Wow.
To be realistic, if I had another life now, I think it would definitely be something to do with, writing, probably. The arts. I still do painting, much use that is. I do sketching. I do. I love doing still life. I hate doing it. Yeah, I love doing that. It's just another way of using your brain. I love it. It was like my best subject at school. But seriously, what do you do with art as a subject?
Maybe become an artist.
Yes, but I didn't think you could do that then. The school I went to, nobody became an artist. Nobody made money. No. It just didn't seem.
So do you have any of your stuff up on for sale or online, or do you sell your stuff?
No,
what do you do with it?
I don't. No, I don't. God, no, it's not good enough for that. It's really just a private practice. It's a bit like a meditation. It's just really a different way of using your brain. You're not switching off. You're not going into zombie mode, but you're in a completely different area of your mind.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Which is just very nourishing and refreshing. And it's also difficult and annoying, but it's great to have something to work on that isn't part of your normal life. I do. I wouldn't think of doing it professionally. No, I think I'd probably like to work at a zoo or something with animals. I love animals, love being around animals. Yeah.
Gorgeous. Well, you've plenty of options there, Kate. Can I ask, what is next for Kate O'Toole, or do you know?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. It just, honestly, at the moment, it is, I suppose, because it's coming towards the end of the year, an enormous amount of horrible estate work has piled up. And my least good thing is admin. I am terrible at admin. You should see the stage. I can't even see my desk for the Everests of papers that are piling up. And I have to address that or I'm going to go mad. So I don't do Christmas. I don't have to because I don't have kids. Thank God I'm off the hook for that. So I'm just planning before the new year. This is what's next for Kate O'Toole. Before the new year, she is going to clear her desk.
Oh, that's a task in itself. Good for you.
That's what's right here in front of my eyes. Yeah.
Okay, I always finish out the interview with a Live Wild quickfire round. Kate O'Toole, are you ready for your Live Wild quickfire round?
No. Go ahead.
Okay, what is your favorite of your father's films and why?
Oh, okay. I have two favorites. One is My Favorite Year because it's very, very funny. That's why. He's very, very good in it. And The Ruling Class, again, for the comedy. It's a very flawed film. It has a kind of a botched ending for various boring production reasons. But up until it falls off at the end, it is an absolute delight. It's great writing, fantastic actors, superb comedy. The Ruling Class and My Favorite Year. I tell you, the one I don't like is Lawrence of Arabia, because that was one of my first ever films. It was a fucking nightmare. It's too long for a young child. You can't sit with them up for 3 hours like that about Middle Eastern politics. You don't have a hope of understanding. I lost a tooth in the middle of it, and I'd been brought up never to fidget in the audience. So I just sat there for 2 hours with a pool of blood and tooth in my palm.
Oh, Kate.
We got back to the house and parents waiting anxiously in the hall. They said, well, did you like Daddy's film? And we both just looked at them and went upstairs to the nursery and we said, no, we did not.
Oh, my goodness.
And another film I hated was Mary Poppins because I had a lot of nannies growing up.
Oh, yeah.
The thought of a nanny having those kind of powers was just like, no, I don't like that. I don't think I like that. That was like a horror for me.
Here's another question. Actually, do you believe in magic or powers? Nannies having powers?
I believe in nature. I believe in the power of nature, the rhythms of nature, which are very magical and intangible, unseeable things that make the forces of our world move. Absolutely. And I absolutely believe in magic as it is presented to an audience, because I have a great fondness for old vaudeville shows and magic tricks. And I just love being backstage, seeing how they do the tricks, the optical illusions and things like that. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's like you're getting to literally look beund the curtain and, you know, it's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. What do you stand for?
Oh, God. Oh, Lord. Oh, gosh. A lot of things. I suppose I grew up being a feminist just because I went to an all-girls school that had broken many, many barriers. It was the first school in England to get a woman into Oxford, the first woman to become a dentist, the first doctor, all the suffragettes, not all of them, but a lot of them went there. It was so I took it for granted. My mother always worked as well. She was a working woman. She had her own career, her own money. She did her own thing. And I just assumed that was the normal way of things. So when I found out that it wasn't, I was quite appalled. So I do stand obviously for equal rights. I know it sounds very old-fashioned, but we don't have them yet.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. So I very much stand for that.
Mm.
No, I don't know what else.
If you were to distill yourself down to an essence, what would the essence be?
In what way? Like something you drink or something you smell? What would I smell like?
Everyone asks that question. And it's like, it could be anything. Some people say lavender. Someone else said gin and CBD oil. Someone else said cheese. So, it can be anything, anything.
Oh God. I don't know the answer to that question, because for that, don't you need an outside eye? That's somebody else's call, not mine.
Oh, do you think so? Oh,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes. I don't know if I can see myself well enough to say that. I'm not a great one for self-examination. Yeah, I don't know. That's a bit like asking, what's your favorite meal? Is that the next question?
Yeah. What's your favorite meal?
Cheese sandwich.
There you go. What is the wildest thing you've ever done?
Oh, where do I begin? We'd be here for another hour. Oh my God. I've done so many fucking crazy things. The one that springs to mind most readily is the time I jumped out of a plane for an animal rescue charity. That was a pretty wild thing to do.
Yeah.
It was horrible as well. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Don't do it. Anybody who tells you it's wonderful and magical is fucking lying.
Yes.
The only good part is when you land on the ground and you realize you're not dead.
Yeah.
That is a moment of transcendence. That's for sure.
So true.
But that's all it is. Anyway, I was doing this thing for charity. It was Sharon Shannon who dragged me into it, and a whole load of sort of Galwegian celebrities, a lot of musicians, because Sharon was organizing the whole thing. So when you do one, I don't know if you've done one, you have to go up in twos into the plane.
Yeah, I've done one.
Yeah.
So, I did tandem jumps.
Exactly. So there's only one other jumper in the plane with you and the two guys in charge of the parachutes. So I didn't really know. It was random who you got assigned to. Maybe it was something to do with weight, or I don't know how they picked the couples, but you get assigned somebody, off you go. The thing had been delayed because of mist and dangerous conditions.
Oh, wonderful. That's what we want to hear, is dangerous conditions before you get on the plane.
And this was at Galway Airport. So we repaired to the bar and I got pissed out of my head, and I had come prepared. I had a hip flask full of tequila. I had a spliff on me. I had Valium. I had everything. So I get into the plane, and I don't know the woman who's with me, but it turned out to be lovely Coach O'Riordan from the Pogues.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And obviously I'd never met her, but I knew her to see. And so we're waiting for takeoff. And we're both terrified. And I said, listen, I've got everything here. I've got this hip flask. I've got this. I've got that. Emptying out all my pockets. We'll be grand. Taking a swig of the tequila. She was like backing away from me, going grey on the plane, which hasn't taken off yet. She goes, oh, I'm more afraid of you than I am of the plane. And I said, why? She said, I'm in AA.
Oh, no. Oh,
I'm trying to ram tequila down her throat.
Oh, Kate. Oh, my goodness. Amazing. Such great stories. And that's probably one of the tamer ones, I would imagine.
It is.
What is the one thing you do every day that helps you live wild and free?
Walking my dog.
Yes.
Yes. He has to be walked. He's not very well. Poor little thing. He came from a puppy farm. I stand for closing down puppy farms. My goodness me. The grief that they put people through. Oh, Lord. So his bones are messed up. He'll never be right, and he won't live long. So I have to, mind him. And just seeing him enjoying as much as he can, his walk, makes everything feel good, really. Yes.
Beautiful. Kate O'Toole, has been an absolute pleasure to chat to you and to get to know you even better again during this conversation. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. God, the time has flown.
I know.
I told you were good at this.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed making these episodes. Thank you, as always, to our amazing guests. A special thank you to Aoife McNamara, my co-producer extraordinaire from Imagine Media. Please like, share, subscribe, and rate us. It all really helps. And remember, this content is for education and entertainment purposes. In short, it's not gospel. I always say, take what resonates with you and leave the rest. Always question everything and do your own research.